Welcome to the Cybersecurity in Railways conference, organized by the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity and the European Union Agency for Railways. It is a pleasure to have you with us. I'm Marianne Theoharidou. I will be your host. And together with my colleague Thomas Sadel from ERA, we will be your moderators for over 2, I hope, exciting days of presentations and discussions. It is a pleasure. It is a pleasure to welcome you all. We were hoping to be able to host you either in ENISA or ERA premises, but regardless of the circumstances, we hope that in the near future we'll be able to do so. And nonetheless, we hope this day will be interesting for you. And we are very glad for your enthusiastic participation already. And for and with this occasion, we had the opportunity to host more of you. So we're very glad about that. Today and tomorrow, we will explore how the railway framework is evolving to reflect the changes and the challenges for cybersecurity. And to set the stage, I would like to introduce Mr. Josef DOPPELBAUER, who is the Executive Director of the European Union Agency for Railways, and Mr. Evangelos, who is the Head of the Policy Development and Implementation Unit at ENISA, who will be giving the welcome addresses. Josef, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Marianti, and good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this ENISA-ERA conference on cybersecurity in railways. The event today is the follow-up of the short webinar on rail cybersecurity that we organized jointly with ENISA in November 2020. Since the last ERA ENISA webinar on cybersecurity, what has happened? On the policy side, the European Commission is currently proposing an update of the Network Information Security Directive, NIS2, in order to strengthen the cybersecurity measures to be adopted by the member states. DG Move is also fostering the awareness raising of railway stakeholders thanks to its land transport security platform, and a cybersecurity toolkit has been developed to better consider the risk analysis. Cybersecurity is now a major concern also for national safety authorities. For example, in France, EPSF has summarized the related challenges in a white paper jointly with the French infrastructure manager and the main railway undertaking, with the French Cybersecurity Agency and with ERA. On the standardization side, the CINELEC Working Group 26 has delivered the promising technical specification 50701 on cybersecurity for railways, now under review by the national committees. A published version of this technical specification is expected before summer 2021. A voluntary reference to these standards will be made through the application guides developed by ERA, and this technical specification is expected by many railway stakeholders to lay the foundations of a common risk analysis methodology, linking the security analysis to the safety case, as demonstrated by a case study proposed by the Italian railway stakeholders. On the research and innovation side, Shift the Rail has gained maturity, and the technical demonstrator 2.11 on cybersecurity will soon demonstrate the applicability of their findings on specific projects such as automated train operation or adaptable communication systems. Technical interoperability standards for the EU railway, and in particular for railway automation, are on the verge of being proposed for consideration in the rail regulatory framework, proposing the principle of secure by design for shared railway services. UIC has also recently launched a cybersecurity solution platform, taking a pragmatic approach in building a solutions catalog to risks and vulnerabilities identified by the railway users. Last but not least, on the information sharing and cooperation side, the ER-ISAC is attracting more and more participants to share concerns or even vulnerabilities to trusted members, ensuring a collective response to the cybersecurity challenge. An open call of Shift to Rail for Secure Rail is in addition developing a proposal for a European computer security incidents response team, allowing for identified threats to be instantly shared to targeted railway stakeholders. Railway industry is taking up the challenge of this readiness for collective response. The European Union Agency for Railways, ERA, is paying very close attention to all these developments in the field of railway cybersecurity. And, as this online conference demonstrates, works in very close cooperation with ENISA to ensure that both the cybersecurity and the railway regulatory framework are cross-fertilized for the benefit of the railway stakeholders. In this online conference, today and tomorrow, we cover a comprehensive range of topics, ranging from policy, standards, certification, research and innovation, to information sharing and cooperation. In this spirit, I would like to wish you a very informative 2 days with this conference. And I now hand over to Evangelos OUZOUNIS, the head of unit for critical infrastructure in ENISA. Evangelos, the floor is yours, please.
Yeah, Mr. Doppelbauer, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. And on behalf of our Executive Director, Johan Lepasar, I would like also to welcome you all. It's a great pleasure to be here with you and to organize with our good colleagues from ERA this interesting conference. As Mr. Doppelbauer rightly said, this is a follow-up of the seminar that was done between the two agencies a few months ago in October. We have very long and good and deep collaborations with our good colleagues from ERA since long, because this is a cross-cutting problem or theme, and it's very important, that we are joining forces. We are a cybersecurity agency. We don't know a lot of things about rail, but for that reason we partner with ERA. But we understand a lot about cybersecurity. We understand that many sectors, including the rail sector, is going a profound change because of the digitalization. Allow me to say that a few introductory remarks, that 1st of January basically marks the beginning of the European Year of Rail. So I hope that the event, collides very nicely. Cybersecurity and railway sector are closely knit together, so they relate with each other. And the European railways play a very important role in the European economy. You know that very well. This is the oldest, maybe, transportation mean. And despite the fact that we feel a bit nostalgic about it, it is still very, very important for transferring goods across mainland Europe. As the sector faces these challenges and at the same time is being transformed to digitalization, obviously cybersecurity is one of the key requirements that will enable railways to exploit their full potential. So we have increasing digitalization and connectivity needs. We have proprietary technology used by the system, by the environment. We have a need for operational technology and IT, these two worlds to cooperate, to address, joint problems, and obviously address risk management and cybersecurity needs. We have obviously the advent of new technologies like 5G, IoT, and smart technology that are going to offer new advantages, new services, new business models, to the rail sector. But they don't come for free, obviously, and they bring their own vulnerabilities. They bring their own IT challenges, and we'll have to find a way to manage them. So some of the challenges that we see, and we look forward to the discussion today and tomorrow, is basically that railway stakeholders must strike a balance between operational requirements and business competitiveness. Railway stakeholders usually depend on suppliers with based on different technical standards, and cybersecurity is basically an important component. OT systems, operational technology systems for railways have been based on systems that were at a point in time secure according to the state of the art, but due to the long lifetime of systems, they eventually become outdated or obsolete. They also have inherited vulnerabilities with the advent of new technologies that need to be considered. So there are existing rail-specific regulations that don't include cybersecurity provisions in the greatest extent possible. So, and for that reason, there are a lot of policy important considerations also in the ENISA Directive and ENISA Directive 2, and I see Commission colleagues, lining up, for their presentation soon. So there are important questions, and I hope that the conference, is going to address them. So how do we secure, rail components, rail systems, for example, ERTMS? How to assess such kind of holistic risks, which are physical, cyber. How to secure the supply chain of railway technology and services, an important topic, supply chain, also in the context of the rail sector. How to tackle the extensive attack surface of the rail ecosystem. It's a vast ecosystem with not only particular components, but in our landscape as well. And what do we do with vulnerabilities? How to improve information sharing and collaboration. I think Josef mentioned this. And how to assist the railway industry to define and eventually comply with the current and future cybersecurity requirements. These are some of the questions that I hope can trigger your imagination, can trigger your interest. And please feel free to contribute to this interesting conference. We look forward, to your feedback, to your questions, to your interaction. We seek to learn from you. I understood that more than 1,000 people have registered. Many important stakeholders have registered, key players, and this is a great opportunity actually to somehow exchange views and understand, how we can address such kind of questions and such kind of problems, for the future. What I can say is that ENISA and will continue support the member states and the Commission in the implementation of the ENISA Directive. The rail sector is part of this ENISA Directive and will be part of the ENISA Directive too. And we will continue collaborating with our good partners from ERA and the colleagues of Mr. DOPPELBAUER. So this is for us an honor, and this is an exemplary collaboration that you cannot easily find, So EU agencies and organizations coming together to address a joint problem, and we look forward, to also to the future of this collaboration. So thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you, and also for kicking off this event today. So the floor is back to Marianthi and Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you, Evangelos. Thank you, Josef. I will let's start. The first session for the day will focus on policy issues and what are the latest developments from the policy side. Well, after the coffee break, we will discuss on standards and certification. During the presentations of our speakers, you will be able to pose questions through the Q&A function. Some of you are already using it as well. I hope the agenda is visible at the moment. We will do our best to address all your questions today, but because we are quite a few, we are approaching 600 participants, which is very pleasant to see. We will keep a note of all your questions and try to respond to them later so that they don't get lost. I received questions about the presentations. These will be shared after the event. And now I would like to welcome Mrs. Svetlana Schuster, Mr. Alexis PERIER, and Mr. Laurent CEBULSKI, who will be our panelists for this session. I will now introduce Svetlana first, so I can share the slide. Svetlana is head of sector responsible for the implementation and review of the NIS directive at the DG Connect of the European Commission. She is the person that knows very well the proposal of the Network and Information Security Directive, and she will give us an overview today to see how the proposal could potentially affect the railway sector. Svetlana, the floor is yours. I'm starting to share your slides.
Okay, thank you very much, Marianti. Thank you very much for the invitation to this very interesting event. As Marianti said, I'm Svetlana Schuster, and I'm working for the European Commission, and more specifically for the Directorate in the Commission, which is in charge of the cybersecurity, of the horizontal cybersecurity policy within the Commission. And yes, today I would like to present to you briefly our first EU horizontal legislation on cyber security, and more specifically the revision of this piece of legislation. So maybe we can start with the next slide. Yes, exactly. So the cybersecurity resilience, it's a key priority in the context of the protection of the critical infrastructure in the European Union, and at a time when the private and the public sectors rely increasingly on digital infrastructure for the delivery of essential services to the society and economy, those become, of course, major targets of cyber attacks. And in order to address all these new challenges, which are stemming from the speedy digitalization of the society, the Commission decided to intervene in 2013 and propose a dedicated law on cybersecurity, covering several key economic sectors such as energy, transport, health, digital infrastructure, and finance. The aim of this legislative proposal was to boost the overall level of cybersecurity in the EU, and in this way to ensure the smooth functioning of the internal market. As you can see from the slide, it was a long way of negotiation between the co-legislator, almost 3 years it took till there was a political agreement reached. It was in December 2016 on the final text of the directive. In 2017, we had the adoption of the official adoption of the directive, also the first meeting of the cooperation group, the sister network. These are the forum with experts from member states under the umbrella of the NIS directive, and the work has started. In 2018, all member states have transposed, it was the deadline, and by now all member states have transposed the NIS directive into their national law. Yes, maybe we can already go to the next slide, because I wanted to show you what we have done basically from the adoption till now. What we have done was to carry out 27 member state country visit to see how this first cybersecurity law was transposed into into all member states, to see what were the gaps, and we have all this information we have used in order to make evaluation of the directive, and also to conduct the impact assessment, and finally to have the legislative proposal on the table. So as you can see from the slide, we have used a lot the experience gathered within the cooperation group. This is the strategic forum with member state experts. So we have also had a big help from our colleagues from ENISA, from the Cybersecurity Agency, with all the expertise and helping and help in the implementation of this directive in the member states. What we have also conducted was a specific survey, a study, specific surveys, and also study dealing with the evaluation and the impact assessment of the new proposal. There were several workshops organized with stakeholders and expert interviews, and all these you can find in the final deliverables, which are published on our website, the impact assessment, and of course the legislative proposal. The next slide, please. So what we have observed when carrying out all this investigation, and basically we have noticed that the current sectors in the NIS 1 are not basically they're not the all critical sectors that needs to have in place cybersecurity requirements. We have noticed that, and therefore, one of the main objectives of our new proposal was to cover a larger portion of economy and society, and more specifically to include more critical sector. What we have also observed is that the current identification process, this is basically the process that every member state has de facto the right to define which are the entities which are mentioned in the annex of the NIS are subject to the security and notification requirements. These so-called operators of essential services are identified in every member state identified them on its own, and we have observed that there are big discrepancies in the identification of companies with similar size, with similar role, but some of them were under the scope of the directive because the member state decided to do so, and in other cases not. What we have also observed that the cybersecurity requirements to which companies are subject are not sufficiently harmonized within the different member states, and therefore next objective of the law was to align the security requirements to have a higher harmonization. The same applies also to the reporting obligation imposed on companies, and the same applies also for the supervision and enforcement provision in the law. What we have also noticed is that we need to have a more enhanced approach in the area of crisis management, in particular the cybersecurity crisis management. And the last of the objectives was also to align our new proposal with the proposed resilience directive on resilience of critical entities. Next slide, please. So here's just one example. This is the identification process, which led in the end to very big inconsistencies in the different member states. You can just see from this picture that, for example, countries like France and Italy, which are similar of the size, they have completely different size, completely different number of identified operators, of critical operators. The next slide, please. So if we come now concretely to the NIS 2 proposal, what we can say is that the NIS 2 proposal remained the three main pillars. So the member state capabilities, the risk management and reporting obligation for companies, and also the pillar related to cooperation and info exchange in the area of cybersecurity. The next slide, please. So when we speak about the national cybersecurity capabilities, what the NIS 2 proposal keep is the national cybersecurity strategies. Also, what is a new element here is the requirement for member states to have a national cybersecurity crisis management frameworks, plans to designate authorities dealing with the cybersecurity crisis management. Also, we have developed a framework for coordinated vulnerability disclosure, and this needs to be implemented by the member state. What we have, of course, is the competent authorities, which will be in charge of the implementation of the requirements imposed on companies. The single points of contact remains to do the link between the member state and to enforce cooperation between them, and also the national competent incident response teams. They remain as well under the new scope of the directive. The next slide, please. So coming back to the sectors which are now covered, as I said in the beginning, now we have much more sectors covered under the new proposed directive. Here you can see on the slide in red, these are the new subsectors and new sectors. For example, in the area of energy, we have district heating and hydrogen operators. In the health, we have some more categories of operators due to the increasing dependency of this sector on digital infrastructure. Also, we have included the wastewater. In the area of digital infrastructure, we have included the data set, the content delivery network provider. Also, the telcos and the trust service provider are in this category. Very important public administration space. And in the second category of important entities, we have also postal courier services, waste management, chemicals, food manufacturing of particular products. And in the area of digital, in the field of digital providers, we also have the social networks under the scope. The next slide, please. So basically, how we decided to include these different sector, we have applied different criteria based on the criticality of this sector. What we have used was the existing member state policy, which are covering sectors beyond the scope of the NIS directive. What we mean here, these are sectors which member states have added in the context of the transposition of the first NIS directive, although they were not explicitly in the scope. What we have also used to assess the criticality of these sectors was the stakeholders' views, which were reflected in the consultation process, the sectorial digital intensity of the sector, and of course the level of importance for the society of sectors, subsector and services as revealed by a major crisis such as the COVID-19. Last criterion which we used was the interdependency among sectors. Next slide, please. So what we have now is that we, for defining who will be under the scope and who will be outside the scope, we have we have abolished the disintensification process, and we have defined a size cap, which will apply to as a principle to define the addresses of the obligation of the directive. In other words, so the general principle is that all companies which are medium size or larger will be under the scope of the directive. There's some exception, for example, the telcos, the trust service provider, TOD registry, public administration, they will be under the scope also if also for micro and small entities. There is also a second exception. The member state will be in a position to add also operators which are below the size cap threshold. In particular cases, for example, if the provider is the sole provider of the service within the member state, where potential disruption of the service provided by an entity could have an impact on the public safety, security, or health. And also if the potential disruption of service which is provided can induce systemic risk. There are also other categories, for example, all entities which are considered as critical under the proposed directive on resilience of critical entities, they will be also automatically subject to the obligation of the NIS directive. The next slide, please. So as you have seen, we have two types of entities. We have essential entities and important entities. The essential entities, they include basically all sectors, all entities which used to be operators of essential service, including the railway, the undertakings in the railway sector, and those will be the only difference basically between the regulatory treatment of essential entities and important entities. The important entities, most of them are the new sectors, is the supervision. So in the old, I would say the old sectors, we will have the normal supervision of authority in with regard to the obligation, which will be ex ante and ex post, meaning that the authorities can every time go and check whether the companies comply with the security and notification obligations of the directive. And in the case of the mostly new sector, the category of important entities, the authorities can do that only ex post. This means only if there is evidence that something went wrong and the company is not complying with the cybersecurity requirements. So as a general rule, the jurisdiction, every member state will have a jurisdiction where the service is provided. And we have some exception, the main establishment, which was also the case in the NIS1, this criterion of main establishment, so which means the one jurisdiction within the 27 member states, it will apply for certain digital infrastructure and digital provider, and so will have to carry out a registry for these entities with information about them. The next slide. Yes, and what is in terms of security requirements, what I said is that the aim of this proposal was really to harmonize to harmonize more the area of this particular area. What we have now in the draft text in Article 18, we have more concrete security requirements, which needs to be its mandatory part of the cybersecurity requirements, like risk analysis and information system security policy, incident handling, business continuity, supply chain security, and so on. Also, what is the new element is the accountability for top management for non-compliance with cybersecurity risk management measures. And what also can be mentioned here is that all the security requirements listed here can be further specified by the Commission by means of implementing acts. So the next slide, please. Yes, so one important element of the new directive is the supply chain security. So we have included that in several places in the directive. So the one is this: we will have a supply chain security as a part of the security measures, which the entities will need to take into account. Also, the member states are obliged to address cybersecurity in the supply chain in their national cybersecurity strategy. And also, we have explicitly tasked the cooperation group to carry out coordinated security risk assessment of specific critical ICT services systems or product supply chain using the example of 5G. The next slide. So on the reporting requirements, again, we have more specific levels and clarification on how the reporting should happen. Now we have basically 3 stages, but the 2 are absolutely obligatory. Initial notification of the cyber incident within 24 hours, and then a final report within 1 month. As the authority or the CCERT can request an intermediate report if it's considered necessary. The 24 hours deadline for the initial notification and 1 month for the final report are can be, the entity can deviate if this is needed. What is also new here is that the CCERT or the competent authority following the initial notification should be able to provide support if the company requests it. So, next slide, please. Yes, we have some more provisions on cooperation, information sharing. What is new is the peer reviews of member state effectiveness of cybersecurity policy. What we have what we have also developed and is new for the NIS2 proposal is a framework of specific cybersecurity information sharing arrangements between the companies. So the companies know how they can share information in their trusted communities. The next slide, please. Yes, so what is new, as I mentioned already, and I think this will be the last slide, and I will stop here, is the coordinated vulnerability disclosure. This is an extremely important policy, and we have noticed that some member states have a very good policy in that area. Some member states are still considering, but has not developed anything in that, and we decided to have a big harmonized approach across the EU, and establish a basic policy, a basic framework in the NIS2 proposal, where we request that the member state should designate one national CSIRT as the coordinator and facilitator of the coordinated vulnerability disclosure process at national level in the CSIRT network. So this is the forum where all CSIRTs in all member states come to cooperate and exchange operation information. This framework will be in charge to deal with a multi-vendor coordinated vulnerability disclosure. We have also requested the member state to have a dedicated policy framework on coordinated vulnerability disclosure, and also we want to see ENISA basically running a European vulnerability register where all newly discovered vulnerability can be reported. I think I will stop here. These were the most important elements, and yes, I will be happy if you to answer your questions. Sorry.
Thank you, Svetlana. In fact, drink some water, please. In fact, we have a couple of questions. One moment. Very briefly, before we move to the next presenter, there was the question whether the metro operators are included in the new proposal, or it's just railway. There is also a question on how the size of an entity is defined. These two questions to begin with.
Basically, there is no change in the scope for the railway sector. So everything what was currently covered under the NIS1, it will be the same definition apply. So what we have here, the railway sector cover all companies managing railway infrastructure, and also railway undertakings which provide services for transport services for the goods and passengers. So these are nothing new. On the size cap, who will be covered? So the general principle will apply to medium and large entities. In other words, this will be entities who that have more than 50 employees, or annual turnover of more than 10 million, if I'm not wrong. So this is the size cap, and of course, as I said, what is important to notice that there are exceptions. But for the railway, I think not for the railway, but the exception which can apply to all sectors. So the member state will also be in a position to add a small provider if those are the single provider, for example, in the member state of this particular service.
Thank you, Svetlana. I will now pass the floor to Alexis PERIER. Alexis, I will make you the presenter already, so you can start sharing your slides and open your camera as well. For the audience, Alexis is a policy officer in the Transport Security Unit of the European Commission's Director General for Mobility and Transport. So he will cover today the developments on the policy side from the transport side, and we will see how they align with the ENISA directive as well. Alexis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marianti. Good morning, everyone. Very happy to be here. Let me start by really congratulate ERA and ENISA for the event. I see that more than 600 people are online, which certainly is very impressive. So I welcome you all to my living room. So indeed, I will provide a short update on policy developments. And in fact, I will focus on one especially, which is the cybersecurity toolkit that Mr. Doppelbauer mentioned in his introduction. So I will speak for about 10 minutes, I think, and then if you have any question, I'll be really happy to take them. All right, let me just start by linking with the previous presentation, which was on the cybersecurity legislation at EU level and on the ENISA directive, which of course is the relevant framework for the rail sector, and it will remain so under the next version, the ENISA 2.0. And we see that there was a good uptake of this directive in the rail sector, where there was, as of December 2020, so 73 so-called operators of essential services in the rail sector, and we can certainly anticipate that this number will increase with the new threshold criteria and size criteria that Svetlana just presented. I also wanted to quickly say a word on another workshop which we had organized back in 2019, also with the colleagues of DG Connect, with ERA, with ENISA. And at the time, the idea was really to look at the ENISA directive. So it was, of course, a nice one, if I may say, at the time, and to discuss with the sector the status of implementation and what could be done alongside the directive. And so this event brought together the rail security people, the rail safety, and also the cybersecurity authorities in the member states, and of course the industry. And just really quickly, some of the conclusions. The first was that the ENISA directive was a relevant framework for rail transport, although at the time it was noted that there were some differences of implementation among the member states. And as Svetlana said, that was one of the motivation for the Commission to propose a revision of the directive. But still, I mean, this directive works and delivers for the rail sector. The second conclusion we had at the time was that we had to give more time, actually, to some initiatives which were ongoing, and in particular the TS 5701, which is not delivering, and which I think will be presented later today. So that also is an excellent link with later. And finally, and that will bring me to the core of my presentation. Back in 2019, we also stressed the importance of other horizontal elements, if I may say, which are non-regulatory and which relates to cyber awareness, cyber skills, but also the exchange of information. And on that note, it's also very positive that the Rail ISAC will be with us tomorrow to present their work. So on cyber awareness, which is where I want to get at. So as we all know, the human elements tends to be the weakest in the cybersecurity chain. We all make mistake. People see cybersecurity as an IT issue only, and they do not follow either by choice or by ignorance the company security policies. And the attackers certainly know how to exploit this vulnerability. So that's the importance of cyber awareness in just very few words. And our contribution as DG Move was to contract the development of what we call a cybersecurity toolkit, which would contain some good principles of cyber hygiene, some recommended tips and practices to be really cyber aware. And we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. I mean, certainly there's a lot of material out there, but what we thought was new with this product is that it would focus really especially on not only the land, but on the transport sector. And we would try to cover all transport companies, the big ones, but also the small ones. because certainly for SMEs, and think, for instance, in the trucking industry, you have 1 million companies active in this business in Europe, many of which are SMEs, and they may not really look at cyber as an issue of concern for them. And we want to talk to these companies, but also to the bigger ones, and say, guys, look, be careful. Cyber is an issue. It can impact you. But if you follow a couple of basic principles, that will certainly contribute to your security. So that's for the toolkit, and I will now present it to you in a bit more details. So, okay, that's the architecture. First, I should say that the toolkit is actually a PDF document. I'll try to show it to you at the end of my presentation. It's a PDF document with easy navigation embedded to it, so you can easily move to a section to another. And the sections, what are they? So first, the toolkit contains a very short threat landscape. I mean, ENISA does great threat landscape, so we didn't want to reinvent anything, just like have some of the key findings and make them relevant for our purpose, which was, as I said, to provide good practices of cybersecurity. And there are two levels. The first level, which we call level 1, is really the basic level. So we target all transport staff, some of whom may have no prior knowledge of cybersecurity, and we really provide some really basic principles and tips. And then we have a level 2, which is more advanced, and which is organized by transport sector. So as I will show you, we have one module for aviation, one for land, which covers rail, obviously, and one for maritime. And this is targeting security and cybersecurity practitioners in companies, big or small. And so the practices we provide go into a bit more details. And alongside the toolkit, we have an awareness poster that I will show you again of the presentation. So let me just say a few words on this level 1. As I said, basic, targeted audience, all transport staff across all modes. That's it's quite wide. And it's organized by type of threat. So we have identified 4 main threats, which we have on the screen. I will not go into the detail. And then the practices provided are arranged per threat. So for instance, if we look at malware, this is how the toolkit looks like. It's just a repository of good practices. So for instance, because it's level 1, it's fairly basic, but still, small actions can make a big difference. For instance, okay, do not open attachments in suspicious emails. Do not click on unknown links. Avoid plugging USB sticks into your work computer. Really, this kind of thing. So that's for the basic level. And again, we have similar recommendations for all of the 4 threats. And then we have level 2, which, as I said, is more advanced and which is organized in modules, which try to be tailored to the need and specifics of each of the transport mode. So again, aviation, maritime, and land. And there it's not organized by type of threat, but it's by another relatively known and widespread cybersecurity framework, which is the identify, protect, detect, respond, and also recover. So for instance, on the next slide, I'll show you again, this is like a screenshot of the toolkit, but I'll show it to you after the presentation. So, okay, so this is on the identify, and there you see, we go into a bit more details, if I may say, although the advice stays quite general, but it's more technical, let's say. And this touches upon risk assessment, and the toolkit also provides a couple of framework on how to do risk assessment. So we have like link to other documents. Also recommends to have an information security management system, SMS, privacy information management system. So this kind of things, which again go into a bit more of technicality. And again, we have the same for all 4. So identify, protect, detect, respond, which also include recovery. So where do we stand with this toolkit? It was actually published on the 16th of December 2020. It's available on our website. You can go on the website of DG Move. You can also Google Transport Cybersecurity Toolkit, and you'll find it quite easily. And we published it along with an awareness poster, which you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, and which really summarize the key principles and the key findings for the level 1, so for the basic level. and which we think could be a nice printout in A3 format, and you put it next to the coffee machine in your company. So when the employees come, they see, oh yeah, cybersecurity matters, and this is some of the things we should be paying attention to. So it's on our web. We also used the commission groups on transport security to try to disseminate it, and we also plan for this year to translate the toolkit. Because we sometimes make the mistake in the commission to think that everybody speaks English, which certainly is not the case in Europe. So it's, of course, if you have it in your own language, it makes a huge difference, which is why we want to translate it this year. And also we have the support of this expert group on land transport security, the LANSEC, to which we try to regularly bring the topic of cybersecurity and rail cybersecurity in particular, to stay ahead of the curve. So that was my last slide, and I will briefly just, because I think about 2 minutes left, show you. So this is the toolkit. So it's on our web. So as I said, it's just a PDF document with the navigation. So for instance, here you have the threat landscape. Okay, it's there. Let's look here. I can at any time scroll back using this little house. So that's for the threat landscape. Then we have the level 1 that I mentioned. I'll get to it. Okay. Looks like it's a bit slow. Okay. So transport 1, you see here. And then if it's transport 2, then you can scroll by mode of transport. So that's a bit how it looks. It's our contribution on cyber awareness, but of course, we also working closely with ERA, with ENISA, with DG Connect, on all of the fronts to make sure that rail sector can work towards more cyber resilience. So I leave it there. If you have any question, I'll be really happy to answer them.
Thank you, Alexis. People were eager to find the toolkit, so it is publicly available. We should make it clear. I have a question. You mentioned the LANSEC group. Can you please explain again who is part of this group? Because I think there's some confusion on who is join this group.
You're right. This is a typical commission mistake. We use acronyms and assume everybody knows. So this LANSEC group, it was created in 2012 because keep in mind that at EU level, we have security rules for aviation, for maritime transport, but we don't have any, or at least nothing binding on land transport, be it for the physical world, especially for the physical world. But in 2012, we realized that, okay, it's not because we don't have EU rules that we do not in coordination. So we created this group, which brings together the member state authorities, which are competent for land transport security. So that differs from country to another. It can be transport ministry, it can be interior ministry. And it also brings key industry stakeholders active in the land transport sector. And this is a group which meets 4 times a year. It's more like a forum for discussion, for the exchange of good security practices. And yeah, in the past couple of years, there's been a growing trend and interest in bringing cybersecurity to this group. Although initially it was more focusing on physical security, but yes, times are evolving, and now we try to bring more cyber to this group.
Thank you, Alexis. And I will now pass the floor to Laurent CEBULSKI, so I make you a presenter now, Laurent, so you start preparing. He will address the issue of how cybersecurity is affecting the work of the national safety authorities, and he will explain the challenges and potential solutions on the approach his organization followed. Laurent is the managing director of EPSF and has been working in the railway sector for nearly 25 years. He has passed through several positions. He has been an expert, head of research and development, director of authorizations within the French Railway Safety Authority, and he's now the CEO. So, Laurent, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And at first, I would like to thank both ERA and ENISA for inviting me to speak at this webinar. And my presentation will focus on reflection on the interfaces between rail safety and cybersecurity. So, to begin with, what are we talking about? Imagine for a moment that a train is operating normally on a network with signaling that indicates that the block is occupied by that train. And suppose that a malicious organization disrupts the signaling and makes this train invisible, causing a crash accident. In this specific scenario, what is rail safety and what is cybersecurity? Who was supposed to check what from the national railway authorities, from the national or European railway cybersecurity agencies? So to try to answer this question, we created in 2018 in France a kind of think tank, bringing together the European Railway Agency for Railways, my agency, the French Information and System Security Agency, and two operators, SNCF Voyageurs, which is a railway undertaking, and SNCF Réseau, the infrastructure manager. And our common goal was to write a position paper outlining our zone and offering recommendation for moving forward on these issues. And this note was finalized in 2020 and was sent to the safety manager of railway entities that are authorized by EPSF. So here are a few observations from our discussion in the think tank. At first, it is definitely undisputable that the rail sector is becoming more and more digital. Another fact is that cyber attacks affect all sectors and are increasing year after year, as the news showed recently in France, because a few weeks ago we saw that several hospitals has been attacked. Third, the rail sector interfaces with other equally attackable networks, such as the energy sector or the telecommunication one. We can also say that the deployment of new technologies considerably increases the attack surface, in particular through the massive deployment of connected objects and the use of automated systems. When we think about cybersecurity, the first reflex is to think about technical field. But as it was said before, this is definitely both a technical and an organizational issue. And last observation, the notion of temporality should be emphasized, because the cyber time and the rail time are definitely not the same. So, how can these two worlds interact as they have their own regulation networks and frameworks? In one end, we have the highway framework based on technical regulations. So we have the TSIs, the technical specification for interoperability. We have also the CSM, the common safety methods. And for organization, we have the safety management system of organization. And as far as I know, cybersecurity is not taken into account in this framework. On the other hand, cybersecurity is based on the NIS directives, which has been transposed in member states, as well as the military programming law in France, which sets a number of obligations, in particular for highway operators. Each field, each area has its national and European safety or security authority, but we can question ourselves on the interoperability of all these rules. So in our working group, we focuses on main risks and here are some of them. At first, we identified that the maintenance accesses to facilities can be very vulnerable, whether they are physical or handled remotely. And the use of subcontractors can increase the risk of intrusion if they are not rightly monitored. Then the multiplication of public networks that are superimposed with dedicated networks can also be as many entry points for an intrusion. Third, immediate and continuous over-the-air system updates are not compatible with rail time, as I said before, because the rail time requires impact analysis of changes before making these changes. And the degrees of urgency is not the same in cybersecurity and in highway safety. As we have seen previously, the regulatory frameworks are not fully interoperable because the transposition of cybersecurity rules in member states could have consequences on high interoperability, especially by creating restriction to access to the different infrastructures depending on the networks. And it could be a kind of break. And finally, as stated in my introduction, the rebound effects should be considered. You can have a very protected rail system, but if the energy system or the telecommunication systems falls, all the train stops. Then we can also list some existing actions launched in the recent years. Of course, in 2018, when we begin the think tank, we also signed a cooperation agreement with the National Cybersecurity Agency just to cooperate more deeply together, especially to exchange information on safety events, to work on staff training, and to joint work on future frameworks. We should also note the work of CENELEC on a future standard allowing the introduction of cybersecurity criteria in the rail sector. And in France, in the air sector, CCTA, which is the Air Transport Cybersecurity Council, has been set up in France with 3 technical committees, one on cyber risk, one to assess the impact, and one on regulations. And it could be an example for the rail system. Finally, our position paper push forward 5 main recommendations. First of all, even if it seems quite obvious, we have to continue and set up exchanges between authorities to bring together the solution provided to the common risks identified. Then I think that we think that a European benchmark, I don't know if it has already been done, on how states take into account cyber risk in the rail sector would allow us to have a kind of big picture on the measures in place and their potential diversity. Then the creation of a dedicated body based on the ENISA model, but bringing together all the players of the sector more broadly would allow everyone to have the same level of information. Because we know that in France, for example, we note great disparities in knowledge between the this is starting to be done, the integration of cyber risk from the design phase of new system must be generalized. And finally, it will be essential to find the right balance between the urgency of cyber protection and the time required for rail safety demonstration. We have also some other suggestion, like to set up a consultation mechanism between authorities. For example, in France, when I authorize a new infrastructure, a new line, I have to systematically consult the civil security, which is responsible for checking emergency access in the event of an accident in the new line. Also the fire risk associated with the tunnels. And so the civil security issues an opinion, and I take this opinion into account in my final authorization. The same mechanism could be applied to cyber security. Also, why not introducing EC certificates for technical system, but to extend these EC certificates to the field of cyber security in order to facilitate the eyes of rail safety authorities who are not specialists in the cyber domain. And consider also, we should also consider that the possible reconciliation of risk analysis methods, because in highway we have the common safety methods. The cyber security world has also its methods, like for example EBIOS, and they are not so different. So we could perhaps have a global approach for this safety analysis method. And then I would like also to highlight that we have to upgrade the skills of NSA teams, because we are highway experts, but we are definitely not cyber security experts. And so it could be also a risk for us not to have the right eyes, the right technical expertise to have a look on this global risk and global system. That's it. So thank you for your attention, and I'm ready to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurent. I have a question from the audience for you. How do you propose to reconcile the need for timely updates of the OT environment for cybersecurity versus the safety concerns? And the audience asks if this is part of the white paper proposal.
Yes. Now, for now, it's more a suggestion. We don't have the solution yet. What we notice is that when you authorize a train with some command and control systems inside, you fix the version of the onboard systems as the authorization is known by the authority and by the stakeholders. If you add even minor changes on the systems, then the authorization is not the same than the one I issued before. And I understand that if there is a cyber risk, we need to update very quickly the system. But the additional changes, the additionality changes on the systems to protect it from cyber attacks could have consequences on the same work of the system in operation from a highway point of view. And it could be a risk. So in the highway framework, we say, okay, we do a change. So we deploy the common safety method. We have a look on the impact. And then when we are sure that there is no impact on safety and on operation, then we can deploy the change. I don't know. I think the truth is between the cyber time and the highway time. This is quite new, but for now we have to work on it. And it's not a truth from the highway framework or a truth from the cyber security framework. We have to work together to find the right solution.
Thank you, Laurent. May I also ask you mentioned the challenge of also updating the skills of the staff of the national safety authorities. This is a challenge also at the staff of the organizations, of the railway organizations. Do you have a specific plan on how to bridge that gap between that knowledge gap in your authority?
Yeah, we started to deploy a digital transformation plan for our organization. It's not only on training, it's on data, it's on position for new technologies. So it's a global plan. And in this plan, we have one specific axis dedicated on training. What are the challenges regarding IoTs, regarding cybersecurity, regarding digital twin and other new technologies that we do not know now. So we started to find some basic training session to train our teams year after year and to make the gap slowly, but we have to move on this to be sure that we will be ready when there will be a kind of network that include all these new technologies and these new threats, and to be as competent as we are now to understand what are the risks of tomorrow.
Thank you, Laurent. I would like to thank both Laurent, Alexis, and Svetlana for the very interesting presentations. We will now take the coffee break. So you have 15 minutes to rest, and we will be back with the session on standardization and certification. Thank you all.
Well, this is 11:30, so I guess it's time now to reconvene. I hope you had a good coffee break and that you are now ready for next session that will be on standardization and certification. So this session will be centered around the highly anticipated technical specifications 5701 from CENELEC. And we have the pleasure of welcoming eminent guests from the working group 26 that is drafting this technical specification. As during the last session, you will be able to pose questions to our experts during the Q&A function, which you will find at the bottom right corner of your screen, depending on your configuration. Let me now welcome our panelists, Christian SCHLEHUBER, Serge BENOLIEL, and Attilio CIANCABILLA. The first session will be run by Christian and Serge. So Christian joined Deutsche Bahn in 2015 at the Railway Infrastructure Department, where he was assigned to work on cybersecurity for the new generation of interlocking systems. During his activities there, he started to work internationally in several working groups on cybersecurity, and this is how he became convener of the CENELEC Working Group 26 in 2017, and since then works on establishing the technical specification 5701 for cybersecurity in railways. Currently, Christian is responsible for national and international cooperation of Deutsche Bahn in the area of cybersecurity, and is also one of the co-chair of the ERA-ISAC. Serge is in charge within Alstom of the Cybersecurity Management Office for Product and Solution Cybersecurity, and on behalf of Alstom is contributing to the European Rail Cybersecurity Standardization efforts as secretary of the CENELEC Working Group 26. So as we have the honor to have both the convener and the secretary of the Working Group 26, I now leave the floor to them for a complete status update on the technical specification 5701. Christian, Serge, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Thomas, for the introduction, and good morning to everybody on the call. So I saw just before the call we are still around about 600 persons, so quite a good interest in this topic. So what my colleague Serge and I am going to do in this presentation is we want to give you a brief overview about the technical specification 50701, which is about railway applications and cybersecurity. I will start with the first couple of slides and then hand over to Serge. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask us afterwards. I hope we can answer everything. So maybe over the last couple of presentations, it became already quite obvious why we need railway cybersecurity. But what might not be that easily to see is why do we need something specific for railways? So on this slide, you can see some common challenges that we gathered when we started with the work of the technical specification. And what you have to see simply is that with the railway systems, you have
some really specific challenges. While in the typical IT and OT domain and ICS domain, you can do some good perimeter protection, setting guards, fences, dogs, whatever. With railways, you're not able to do this because your business premises are spread over a whole country. You have tracks lying somewhere in nowhere, somewhere in the forest, whatever. So you cannot protect everything. And even if you are able to protect this in your own country, the train is part of a very diverse ecosystem, meaning the train might travel from Amsterdam via Frankfurt to somewhere in Switzerland, for instance, Zurich. And then you go over several types of infrastructure. You have data exchanges between the train and the infrastructure systems there and so on. And besides, you have passengers on the train, which means they want to have some entertainment. Nowadays, the train is not only for transportation. You have your mobile office in them. You do work there. You have meetings. You have some leisure or whatever. You watch movies. So you have safety critical stuff, which is really an issue because brakes have to function. But you also have entertainment stuff or maybe simply passenger information. So everything in one system. And quite an issue there is that you have lots of stakeholders there. If you think about the railway domain, you have in general 3 types of stakeholders. You have the guys operating the signaling systems. You have the persons responsible for rolling stock. And you also have the persons responsible for fixed installations, so power and so on. And not enough. For each of those 3 domains, you have another 3 types. You have the operator, you have the integrator, and you have the provider of systems. So quite a number right now. And then multiply this with safety and security responsibles, and you have quite a number of stakeholders involved in managing railway systems or building them. So what's quite obvious and required is you need synchronization points between all those stakeholders in order to build a good security system. And this is why the Working Group 26 was started back in 2017. So the general topic is to really produce some cybersecurity guideline specification for railway applications, which is not only based on one system, so signaling and so on, but you have all 3 taken into consideration, which also can be seen in the number of participants we have in this group. So we have around about 90 experts. 20 or 30 of them are really dedicated to this group and contribute and provide feedback, information, whatever. And the rest is doing reviews and so on, and maybe also dissemination in their countries. We have quite a widespread group, meaning 30 countries are represented. You can see them on the right side. And we have also some specific stakeholder groups in the working group. For instance, ERA and ENISA are taking part as observers in order to ensure that everything we do is at least in line with what's going to happen on European level. And what was the goal set? Really establishing a unified way for the whole railway sector to handle cybersecurity. And this should not be something like, let's reinvent the wheel and write everything as we think it should be. No, it should be really based on good stuff that's already out there in the world, meaning cybersecurity standards like 62443 or ISO 27001 or whatever. So the group, as I already mentioned before, was formed in 2017. After this, there was a 2-year period of work, and in June 2019, we first approached the national committees and the stakeholders with first draft, received lots of feedback. I think it was around about 2,000 comments. And afterwards, worked and reworked the whole document till December 2020, when we had something quite mature, which could now be submitted for a national vote. This process is currently running and is expected to end on 2nd of April. And as it was already mentioned before, we expect the technical specification to become available somewhere around summer 2021. So what can you expect from this document? This is just a very brief overview, as Serge will go into the details later on. So the document is not free flying. It's based on stuff we already have and can use, either from the railway domain or from the ICS domain. Meaning for the security domain, we have IEC 62443, which is about ICS security. So we took basic concepts from there. And what we also took, not from 62443, but from our European norm, the 5126, is using the life cycle, because most companies in Europe already use these life cycles to build their safety systems, so for system engineering. So we didn't want to invent something new, but use what we already have and attach additional phases there or additional work items and synchronization points. So the stuff that was already there was taken. We adapted concepts. We somehow worked on legacy systems, how these should be handled, and so on, and also how risk acceptance should be done. So we filled some gaps that we saw in the IEC 62443 series, and in the end, we're able to build the technical specification as you can see them currently. What will happen after the document is released? So it is not the only document to happen. So after the next 3 years, the technical specification should be re-examined and possibly also transformed to a European norm, which means we want to take into consideration more topics there and have a really easy to implement process. Okay, so how is this whole document scoped? You can currently see a boundary of IT and OT. You have the business enterprise zone, which is mainly IT. And in the bottom part, you can see the control zone, which is typically our railway infrastructure, so signaling systems and so on. So for the IT zone, we don't touch it with our technical specification. We say, okay, we have good stuff there. For instance, ISO 27001, use it, or use something similar, what you favor more. For the control zone, we say, okay, this is the part where our technical specification kicks in. We take the concepts of 62443 and then apply them to railways. And if you do as well the IT zone and the OT zone, you should be able to fulfill your national cybersecurity laws and so on, which also means being able to fulfill the NIS directive in the end. Okay, so this is some brief overview about what parts of the development lifecycle of a system are really part of the specification. You can see there is a blue boundary. So we say, okay, we work on system definition as well as integration and validation, but we don't cover the parts of really developing a product, meaning design and implementation as well as manufacturing is something really handed over to the supplier, because he has ways to do this. He is also developing already according to 62443 series and so on, and we don't want to interfere with it. We really want to enable the usage of commercial off-the-shelf products which have been developed to some industry best practice. Okay, one last little overview picture. You can currently see a reference architecture on the screen, which is a bit, let's say, the introduction to the content part of our document. So what we do there is, in one of the early chapters, define some reference architecture, which shows you how a railway system is built up, how a station looks like, what systems are typically there, how a train on a journey looks like, and so on, and also where operation, control, and maintenance happen. And why do we provide such an overview picture in this technical specification? It's quite simple, because we estimate that there might be two parts of readers for the document. First, the guys from the railway domain who really have knowledge about the systems, so they know how this looks like. But on the other hand, you might have some more IT-driven security guys. They might not be really aware how a railway system looks like, and these should both have a common ground where they can start discussing, and that the IT guy sees, okay, I'm not only concerned about the train, but the train has also connections to the infrastructure. So really setting a common ground for both groups. So this concludes my first part. I would now hand over to my colleague Serge, who's doing the technical parts. So Serge, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christian. It's a pleasure and honor to detail a bit more of the ETS 5701, which is the result of our working group. As you said, it is grounded, in fact, in both cybersecurity standards, so the 64443, and also the railway background, and mainly the safety standard, related safety standards. And so one first and really the added value of this TS is to make the bridge between cybersecurity and the railway. So first bridge is to provide a life cycle, and the first step, so it's in section 5, it will provide where the cybersecurity activities and which cybersecurity activities should be performed according typical 50126 life cycle. And so the idea is to identify what are the cybersecurity activities, what are the synchronization points and deliverable between cybersecurity and the other stakeholder of railway system under development. And for example, in the concept phase, you will see that you will as input for cybersecurity, we need information for operational environment, what are the security related control already existing level model zone, and reviewing all the security achieved up to now, reviewing the security goals. The idea is at concept phase to define a project cybersecurity management plan, including one thing which is very important, which is the cybersecurity concept in context with all the assumptions performed on the threat landscape and so on. And so this table is then defined for every phase of a 50126. So from system definition operation context, where we will which allow to define the zone and domain, zone and conduit of the system. Next slide, please. And to identify what are the essential functions and to perform the initial risk analysis, which is compliant to the 6443 methodology. Then we will have a detailed risk analysis evaluation. We will have some zoom after that on the following slide, and which is defined in section 7 in the ATS. And it will allow to define the security level target for each zone of the system, and so on, up to the CRS release, and all the 50126 phases are mapped to cybersecurity activity. So one important point is this is a by default mapping. It is also allowed by the TS to use over life cycle. So in this case, there is a criteria of acceptability, which is every cybersecurity activity should be identified in over life cycle, and every cybersecurity deliverable should be also delivered in this over life cycle. Okay, next. One point is that this scheme illustrates well that we perform a merge between concept coming from the 62443, like detailed risk analysis. And so for the one who know the 62443, you will recognize some key steps like threat vulnerability notification, and then to allocate a security level target according to zone. But we also include from our railway background the common safety method risk analysis acceptance principle, and in addition to the 6443, we add the consideration of code of practice. And if a code of practice, for example, a protection profile is applicable to the considered threat, you can apply it. Or do you have a reference system which is still valid and relevant toward the considered threat, you can apply it. So this is one way to allow to take opportunity of standardization work related to common protection profile for the railway environment, for example. Yes, next. The security level target, how it is assigned. In fact, it is a security level target is a set of measures, which is a concept which is defined in the 6443, which allow to define a set of consistent technical measures allowing to protect up to a certain level a zone or an equipment. And the idea is when we perform a detailed risk analysis, we initiate the risk analysis by default security level, and then we, which will be a candidate, and which will be this security level. In fact, is a vector of 7 dimensions according to the 7 foundational requirements of the 6443. And then we perform the detailed risk analysis, and according to the output of the risk analysis, we can consider, do we have an acceptable residual risk or not? And if not, we need to increase the targeted level on one dimension and the other up to achieve an acceptable residual risk level. Yes, next. Yeah. Other point, it is the TS will provide some guidelines to implement the security control which are corresponding to the security level. So for each security level, we have some requirements, security requirements, which are this first column, and according to every security level and area of the foundational requirement, we have a set of applicable requirements. So this set comes from the 6443 and is unchanged. But what we add is informative railway notes which explain to the system integrator or the railway operator, so the reader of this TS, which provide some guidelines for how to implement, for example, a multi-factor authentication in the railway context. And so this, for where it was considered relevant by the work group, you have some railway notes for each of the detailed requirements for the 6443 system level. Okay, next. One very important point, a concept which comes from the safety, by the way, and which were considered as fully relevant, is the concept of cybersecurity case. So the demonstration that we achieved a level of cybersecurity. And this concept is intrinsically needed to demonstrate at the end, when we do the handover between the system supplier and the asset owner, we need to perform and to explain what we have demonstrated. We have performed all the job needed to ensure an adequate resilience or security level. So this is intrinsically needed, but it will also be a tool to address the interface between cybersecurity and safety, as a previous speaker speakers about that. We need to, and it was a big topic of discussion in the work group, to find the relevant border between safety team and cybersecurity team. As cybersecurity shall ensure the adequate protection of safety critical system, and so we should identify the way for the safety to express the need of cybersecurity protection on the safety critical element, and after a way to demonstrate, that this protection level has been ensured through the delivered system. And so the cybersecurity case will be this demonstration and will be provided to the safety organization, which can reuse it or refer it in its own safety case. And the idea also is to be able to decouple the life cycle, and so to be able, if we ensure if we need to perform an update of the system due to security reason, and we perform this update without touching anything which is in the safety case scope, and we can demonstrate that the security is still achieved, we don't need then to modify the cyber case. Okay. So typical content of a cyber case, which is described in annex, will be the description of the system under consideration, so all its zone and conduit. So each time it's a very flexible content description. So each time it will be either inside the document or a reference to a set of already existing documents. So you have a description of the system under consideration, then the description of the threat, what are the risks, what are the threat scenario, then what is the cybersecurity requirement specification and the key assumption, the cybersecurity architecture, the cybersecurity requirement, what has been the cybersecurity management which has been applied during the system development, so the security policy, the cybersecurity plan, the applied cybersecurity process, the applied vulnerability assessment and management, and then demonstration of cybersecurity fulfillment by evidence related to the implementation of the selected cybersecurity measure, verification and validation result, the traceability to the cybersecurity requirement, the result of penetration testing or security test which have been selected for this development. Yes. And also reference to related cybersecurity case if, for example, you have a system which include a component or a subsystem which have itself its own cybersecurity case. One thing is very important also is to provide all the security-related application conditions. So same concept of safety-related application condition, but for cybersecurity, related to the installation, maintenance, and operation phases. So, for example, what is the time to renew your password, or things like that, or the time to renew the certificate, and so on. At the end and conclusion of the cyber case, there is a cybersecurity claim. So, what is the level achieved, and also very important, also the residual risk status, and in order to say it is okay or not with the system as it is, do we have an acceptable level of residual risk. So, what are the next steps? So the next steps will be if hopefully the vote is positive, will be the dissemination of this new TS 5701. The capture or return on experience, because it's not a norm, it's a TS, but the idea is to be able in 3 years, perhaps, to, according to the return of experience, to transform it in an European norm, to foster collaboration with other standardization committee and international committee like EUC, and also prepare a submission of a new work item to complete this TS with some additional materials, complementary material, for example, topic related to cybersecurity during operation, maintenance phases, or security incident response. So that's it. Thank you very much for your attention. And perhaps we have some questions and we can address.
Thank you very much, Serge and Christian. There is already quite a lot of questions. However, as the next presentation is also on the TS 5701 and a specific study case, I would propose, if you agree, that we will take all the questions after Attilio's presentation, if that's fine with you. Thank you. So again, thanks for this very detailed presentation. I guess we are all looking forward to the publication of this specification to be able to use it extensively. By the way, RFAI and to some extent the Italian railway sector are for sure ready to use this technical specification, as we will now see in the case study that will be presented by Attilio. So Attilio is an engineer from RFAI, also a member of the CENELEC Working Group 26, and together with his colleagues, Francesco SPEROTTO from HaslerRail, Davide AMATO from Sadel, and Giulio MAGNANINI from RFAI, they have worked on an application of this technical specification 5701 to a concrete example. So many thanks, Attilio, for presenting this case study today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Thomas. Yes, we are 4 members of Working Group 26 that is tasked with developing this technical specification. And sorry. So I have to say that the technical specification is quite a long and complex document. It is more than 150 pages, and it is a process standard. That means that it provides a framework for the cybersecurity process, but leaves open many possible ways to comply with its requirements. So the complexity on one side and the non-prescriptive nature of the standard on the other side were the 2 motivations for us to develop this exercise. We think that an example of application may have at least 2 advantages. Sorry, I have to. Oops. You cannot see this next slide, eh? Okay, here. So first of all, for ourselves to check out our interpretation to see if we were misunderstanding something. Then to test the specification itself. This is the main scope of the exercise, to see if there are any shortcomings or inconsistencies. And the third idea was to explain the case to the other guys. So we had to choose some examples, simple but also structured, not too complex, not too basic. And so we ended with a fictitious train integrity system that is a device composed by an onboard electronic application with a train-to-ground communication. It is that device that is put half at the head and half at the tail of the train. It measures the position and guarantee the train integrity, as well as other many important safety features. But today I would like to overlook those aspects because, as I said, this was mainly a means to test the standard. So I will skip this slide. This is important because it says that as well as quality, as well as RAMs, cybersecurity cannot just be added to the design, must be embedded in the design itself. And that's why in our specification, the life cycle concept is so central, as Serge and Christian showed you. I have to say that in our example, we just focus on the first block of the 3 main blocks, of which the life cycle is composed according to the V-shaped representation that you can see from the EN 5126 standard. So only risk assessment. That means that we are neglecting at the moment many other important fundamental topics, such as the integration testing, validation, how to build a safety case, and moreover, the iteration of those tasks during the operation and maintenance phases. Anyway, as already Serge showed you, the concept phase is just, I would say, a planning phase. In the system definition, that is phase 2, all the assets are evaluated. They are described together with the essential functions that are those functions important from the point of view of the bendability in general. And the objective is to define, to perform an initial risk assessment in order to, first of all, to exclude those assets that already have an acceptable level of risk. And secondly, to group together those assets that are homogeneous from the point of view of risk in order to arrive to the definition of what in the IC standard is called zones and conduits. In phase 3, this risk assessment is detailed. And now the assets, no more the assets, no longer the assets, but zones and conduits are evaluated against the vulnerabilities and against the threats that could take advantage of the vulnerabilities. Every result is recorded in a so-called threat log. This is a concept derived somehow from the hazard log that is used in the safety field. And here the objective is to assign to each zone and conduit a security level. Also, security level have some similarities with the equivalent safety integrity level. They are also numbers ranging from 0, that means no need of any cybersecurity protection, to 4, that is the maximum need of cybersecurity protection. But there are many differences. The most important one is that SL is not just a single value, but is rather a composition of different values. In fact, it is a vector of 7 values. But before looking at this, I would like to scroll a bit the slides and to show you, we can skip this, to show you some results. Okay, these were the essential functions of our example. Mainly safety and availability was involved. Here we had the output of the initial risk evaluation with the initial evaluation for all the assets, their acceptability, and as a consequence, the classification in zones and conduits. So we arrived to a representation of this type. We had 5 zones and 3 conduits in our example. And then during the detailed risk assessment, this is the initial threat log in which we logged all the threats and the vulnerabilities of the affected assets. And here I wanted to arrive here to the security level vector. So it is a vector composed by 7 elements that reflect the so-called 7 foundational requirements that are described in the IC standard. That are 7 aspects of cybersecurity, starting from the identification and authentication control up to the resource availability. You see that, so you have a vector of 7 values, each one can assume the value from 0 to 4. It is called SLT, where T stands for target, because there are other type of vectors. At the end of the design phase, you will get an SLA that stands for achieved, so which is the actual achieved level of security. So just to complete this example, this was the result. These were the 7 vectors in our zones and conduits. So the last phase would be sorry, I cannot. Okay, I cannot move easily among the slides. Last phase would be here, the specification of system requirements. The specification of system requirements is well defined both in the IC standard and in the TS. It's worth to note that in the TS we added the concept of security-related application conditions. It is once again an equivalent to the safety-related application condition that you can find in the 5126. So essentially, they are those requirements that are assigned outside the system under consideration. So maybe requirements for neighboring systems, or for the maintenance, or for the operator, and so on. So this is very roughly the indication that you can find in the TS. How did we implement those indications in our example? Yes, once again, it doesn't work, so we have to scroll the slides one by one. But here we follow this simple scheme. So to repeat, 3 phases: initial risk assessment to get the zones and conduits, detailed risk assessment to get the SLT vector, and the selection of countermeasures. Initial risk assessment is basically based on 3 sub blocks: impact assessment, likelihood assessment, and risk evaluation. For each asset, the impact is evaluated by considering which would be the worst case when we lose one of those properties that are confidentiality, integrity, and availability. This is done by means of an impact rating table that you can find in the standard, and provides you 5 values for all the characteristics that you have to consider. So at the end, you consider the maximum of those values, and you get a final result that is the impact parameter of the asset. you perform the same thing for the likelihood assessment. So you go to consider for each asset the threat landscape. For instance, we took the ENISA threat landscape. Some threats will be not applicable. For the others, we evaluated both exposure and vulnerability, and by using a likelihood function, the resulting likelihood for the threat. Again, the maximum value among all the threats will represent the likelihood parameter. And here we have once again the help of a table in which exposure and vulnerability are rated from 1 to 3. And the likelihood function, you can see, is just the sum of the two values. One could argue that this way we are managing likelihood and impact as they were two independent and separate variables, whilst they are not. And that's true. We did it just for the sake of simplicity. And anyway, taking the maximum on each side, it is always a conservative approach. Now we have to merge those values to get the final risk or the initial risk for the considered asset. And this is done as usually by using a risk matrix. Risk matrices, if you open the TS, you will find quite a large number of different matrices, different in any aspect, by dimension, by shape, by description, because some are quantitative and some other are qualitative. This to underline that there is no specific or recommended matrix. You have to choose your own, put it in your management plan, and justify it. And of course, it is important that you, together with the matrix, you select an acceptability threshold so that all the values that fall behind this threshold will be considered acceptable. So this would close the risk evaluation, but would not close the let me say the initial risk assessment, because initial risk evaluation is just one of the main of the multiple factors that is used, as I was saying, to select a homogeneous set of assets that could be considered in the same zone or in the same conduit, and therefore subjected to the same cybersecurity requirements. There are many other factors, such as the logical and physical location, or even some technological aspect, if the asset has, for instance, a wireless communication network or not. Anyway, from here onwards, we will consider only zones and countries in our analysis. So we can go down to the detailed risk assessment. For this task, we followed the flowchart that Serge already showed you. It is here. Serge already told you roughly that there are three main paths that correspond to the three pillars described in the common safety method for risk acceptance. So they were originally taught for the safety field, then were derived also in the cybersecurity in our technical specification. Anyway, we just followed the third one, the explicit risk evaluation, that is the way by which you select the SLT vector. So we had to derive this vector for each threat, for each vulnerability, for each zone and conduit. So you may understand that this iteration may easily exceed some hundreds of times. And therefore, we needed a way to reduce the number of occurrences. So before assigning the SLT vector, we performed what we called a pre-filtering. What does it mean? We started from an empty array of vectors. Each one was assigned to each threat and vulnerability of a fixed set. Again, one could argue that threats and vulnerabilities are not to be considered separately because they are in a strict correlation among each other, but we worked in this way, in this linear way, for sake of simplicity, I would say. And then we had two different filtering. The field was to exclude those vector components, so those parameters that were not correlated to the considered threat. And the second was to exclude those threats and vulnerabilities that were not applicable to the zone under consideration. So we arrived to a reduced set of values we had to fill in, and to guess the result, we used the definition of security level. In fact, security levels are defined by the estimation of the attacker properties, as I wrote here. So, for instance, if you will need an SL3 if the violation is intentional, if the means are sophisticated, resources are moderate, skills are specific, and motivation is moderate, and so on. So, on the basis of this definition that you find both in the TS and with a bit more explanation in the IC suite of standards, we filled those parameters, and by picking up the maximum for each components, we were able to derive at the end the SLT for the zone under consideration. How to use this SLT? As I said, the SLT is the key to enter. In the fourth phase, that is the selection of countermeasures. For this phase, we worked on the basis of the list of functions that Serge already addressed. You can find it in the IC section 3-3. It is a very huge list of 100 functions, and those functions are subdivided by foundational requirements. So, for instance, we will have 24 requirements for the identification and authentication control, other 24 for the use control, other 19 for the system integrity, and so on. Within each set, these requirements are also classified according to their security level. So among the 24 IAC requirements, 10 of them are of security level 1, 6 are security level 2, 6 security level 3, and so on. And the table is incremental. This means that if you want to get up to security level 3, you have to pick up all the requirements before. So you have to take account of 10 plus 6 plus 6 requirements. Of course, there is also a need to tailor those requirements, because this is a generic table. So if, for instance, if your zone does not have any wireless interface, you will exclude the related requirements, and so on. And so, yes, I think that Serge already told very well that we have this. I don't know how does the security level vector work? Well, it is easy. For instance, if you have this for a certain zone, the security level is of this kind, 2201313. This means that we have to select the first two subset of requirements for IAC, the first two for UC, no requirements for integrity, and so on. So the vector, in fact, is a way to select requirements from this set of system requirements. Yes, as Serge was saying, this table is copied from IEC 62443, but in our TS there's also a section specific for railway, in which you find some railway notes. The relevant design principles. We have a specific annex in our TS that describes about 20 design principles that are at the basis of those requirements. I would say the justification of those requirements. The stakeholder whom this requirement is for. Is it for the operator, for the system integrator, for the supplier? And the type. Is it a technical requirement or a procedural one? Okay, so this was the method we used. We'll jump to the conclusion here, skipping this. Yes. So, consider the conclusions. We could say that, yes, this was the TS seems to be a good tool to get, in a standard way, a set of cybersecurity requirement specification. We reported here three main remarks. The first is that the path we followed, this explicit risk estimation, may be a very, very long and time-consuming task. The second is that the correlation between security levels and requirements sometimes was questionable. I mean, sometimes we wished requirements had a different ranking, some higher, some lower, but they are locked in the IC standard. Sometimes also it happened that our guess of the security level was not in line with the need we had on the actual requirements. So we had to go back to modify the cell to get the final good set of requirements. So in general, let me say that SLT might be perceived as a kind of bottleneck between the two great domains. On one side, all the threat analysis, and on the other, all the cybersecurity controls. The third remark is that, unfortunately, the suite of IEC 62443 standards is still in evolution. It's not a matter of maintenance. It is a real evolution where foundational requirements are being changed and accordingly also system requirements. And this, you can imagine, can be a great issue for our technical specification in the future. And I would say, yes, that's all. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Attilio, for this very detailed presentation. And thanks as well to your colleagues, Francesco, Davide, and Giulio, for having developed this case study along with you. I guess this is very, very interesting for the participants to see the end users seizing the opportunity to work on the draft test and applying it directly to a real use case. We will now take on some questions, and there is certainly quite a lot. Fortunately, Christian already started to answer in the chat. Thank you very much, Christian. Nevertheless, I guess I will start with you to reply on some of your comments for everyone, because I guess this is of interest for everyone. And first of all, on the component level and the railway specific cyber security certificate that you have already answered, can you elaborate just a little bit more on that? Because I guess this is indeed a very important question for everyone, this one.
Yes, so there was a question if the technical specification will also go into more detail about the component level of cybersecurity at the component level. This is one topic where we had lots of discussions during the starting phase of the working group, but it was decided to not cover this component level because we want to ensure that you are really able to use commercial off-the-shelf products. Meaning, if we would go there with the technical specification 5701 and say, okay, we have those additional requirements. If you then would like to use a component which has already been developed for, let's say, the normal manufacturing systems or whatever, so industrial control system style. If you want to use something like this, and this component already has certifications according to 62443, you would have to do some additional certificates specifically for railways, where we didn't see much sense in it because you would only have additional costs and would have additional product lines, for instance, for firewalls, for encryption components, for stuff like this.
Okay, thanks. And also there was another question to you on the zones and the difficulty to reach the consensus on the SL table, for example. Can you elaborate also a bit more on that?
Yes. So we had during the last year or the year before, somewhere more discussions about network zones and really setting up SL tables and so on. We had this in one of the first inquiry versions of the document. I think there was also the question originating from. But the issue there was we got lots of technical comments on this, and in the end had to decide, okay, we will not be able to cover this in the current time frame because there were lots of discussions within the group. And due to this, parts were moved to the annex. So this is just informative. If you want to have some guidance, some ideas, you can use this, but it's not normative. So you are not forced to use the proposed methods. You can define them or adjust them according to your needs. Maybe this becomes part of an updated version of the technical specification afterwards, but definitely it requires a bit more of work and time.
Thank you very much, Christian. Now turning to Serge. So thank you, Serge, also for answering directly in the chat the question. I think it would be interesting to further elaborate on the one about the slide 13 and obviously the concept of a cybersecurity case that can be updated without the change of the safety case. This is, I guess, also of high interest for the participants today.
Yes, so it has been a deep subject of discussion within the groups, this interface between safety and cybersecurity. So the idea was first to say that we are establishing a cybersecurity standard and not a safety standard. So it is not up to us to define when or when not updating the the safety case. So what we want is to provide the possibility to the safety to not update the safety case to save money and so on when it is, of course, fully demonstrated. So the idea is to say, when we have a cybersecurity case, we need a cybersecurity update. And with this cybersecurity update, the system is designed in such a way that performing this security update, we do not impact safety-related item inside the scope of safety case. And so, for example, we update a firewall which protects safety-critical item. And so, if we at the end demonstrate that the update of the firewall of the security barrier is efficient through security test, and so okay, we have updated the firewall. This firewall is not in the scope of the safety case, but we demonstrate that on cybersecurity point of view, the protection is again at the adequate level. Then you don't need to change anything in the safety case, but to refer the cybersecurity demonstration of the security is still at adequate level.
Thank you. I think this is bringing a further clarification on this. And I guess this is one of the very interesting points of this TS, why this is so expected by the sector to have this mapping between the security case and the safety case. Some questions, still a lot of questions that are popping up for Attilio. So the first very basic question, is your case study publicly available somewhere? That's a question from the chat.
Not yet, because we are still working on it, and perhaps I wrote it in one of the slides. We would like also to share it together with the working group itself. So we would like that it became one outcome of the working group, not just for the four of us. So but yes, surely we hope that we will be available soon.
Okay, very good. And additional questions to you. So as explained in your case study, you have thought about this fictional train integrity device. Have you considered other applications before selecting this application in particular?
Yes, we selected this one just because we were absolutely not aware of this solution. It is completely out of our daily work. And so we were obliged not to focus on details, but just to focus on the technical specification. So it was an example chosen because none of us has never applied applied to this device. But no, we didn't have any other example, for instance, on signaling or on ERTMS, not yet.
Okay, thanks. An additional question that I guess is for the three of you, so for Attilio and Christian as a end user and maybe to Serge as a provider. When roughly will be the new railway products certified with the new EN 5701? Who wants to start?
So first, for now we have a TS. So to get to an EN, there's some work to perform, and so usually we need 2 to 3 years of a TS being used in order to have some return of experience, potentially improve it, and to become an EN. So if we speak really about certification related to a EN, we need to wait the publication of the EN.
Okay. And from Christian, Attilio, on your side, when do you see or when will you ask for providers to bring you certificates of compliance to this TS? Will you wait also for the EN phase or are you going to use that specification for your product, for your equipment?
Yes, perhaps not asking a certificate, but surely beginning to put in the bids a reference to this TS should be useful, especially in these 3 years, because we need really to focus on this TS as a method to be evaluated. And we have to evaluate it not just by these kind of examples, but in the real life. So I think we will begin to ask for it right soon. Christian?
Yeah, I almost have the same answer to the question. The real certificate, this will take some time, especially as this is currently a technical specification. So more something that's not mandatory, but you can use it, but you're not forced to use it. So how we are using it currently is some of our departments which deal with requirement specifications and also tenders have the document, are aware of the document, and will include this also in the tenders. So of course, this will be a point where a supplier afterwards has to state, okay, I'm compliant to this document, or I'm not using it, but I'm using 62443, and I can prove that I have the same level there.
I see. Okay, thank you. An additional question to you, Christian. I think maybe this question has been emerged from the toolkit that was presented by Alexis earlier on. Is there a TS 5701 toolkit to assist the rail operators to define SLT, SLC, and so on? Something that would be similar to COVID 5 online. As a convener of this working group, do you know if Working Group 26 is working on such a toolkit?
So Working Group 26 is currently not working on such a toolkit. This is something I can tell you definitely, because we are currently waiting for the approval of the document by the national committees. If such a toolkit is developed, this is a sort of subject to the audience out there. Maybe if the national committees say this is required, then there might be some work on such a thing. Maybe it could also be useful. Depends. I'm aware that some companies already use such a thing. I saw it, I think, 2 weeks ago. But I would check if this is really 100% compliant. Of course, something which really has to happen before we can discuss about toolkits is that the document needs approval and successful vote.
Yeah. So you were mentioning earlier that possibly a second version of this TS might be published, and also when promoted to an EN, potentially some updates or improvements will be included as well. I will go back to a more technical question for Serge. And this is related to the public key infrastructure, PKI. And the question is about the SR 11213. Does it take into account techniques like PKI to secure identity of active equipment?
So I do not have all the SR in mind, but PKI infrastructure at 1 month level 2, level 3, we will need things like that to ensure integrity, to ensure authenticity of equipment and so on. So, but I do not have the model every requirement in mind, so I cannot be more precise than that without looking at the standard itself.
Okay. Thank you very much. Two additional questions that I would like to take for sure, but we still have time for additional questions. So please do not hesitate to use the Q&A. The two next questions are for discussion amongst the four of us. And I will start with the first one. Will there be the equivalent of an independent safety assessor for a cybersecurity case? And I guess this is somehow linked to the following question on if ERA is thinking about making the TS 5701 mandatory in the next TSI package. We could also think about the common safety methods package. So who want to start first with that? So about the independent safety assessor for a cybersecurity case. Attilio, maybe?
Yes, thanks. Let me say that I think it is a bit too early at the moment but I know how was important the ENISA contribution for the development of the safety cases about 15 years ago. So if we hadn't any ENISA, it would be difficult to impose a safety case to all the companies and to get such a level of standardization that we have up to now for safety. So I think that's probably in the future we will have also the assessor for cybersecurity. But at the moment, I would say it's really too early because we need to tune this instrument, this tool.
Christian, your views on this?
Yes, I have the same opinion on the assessor. What will happen first is really gaining some experience with the document, because for the moment we wrote the document, we checked some examples, but I think as soon as it is released and more persons and companies start using it, we will see where the pitfalls are, what has to be increased and improved. And afterwards, we could think about assessors or something like this.
Yeah, thank you. I guess this is also linked somehow to the discussion we had in the first session about the capacity building for expertise on cybersecurity. Cyber experts are difficult to find, and especially in the railway sector. So maybe we need also to get some maturity from the sector on this part, so that also for the ENISA part, we will have the capacity and the skills building as well. From the industry perspective, Serge, how do you see this possibility?
I think it will be needed in the long term, clearly. We effectively at the assessor side, we need to ramp up in competency, but we already have some discussion with safety assessor company. We want to diversify in cybersecurity, so I know they start to make the move. We have also company we are able to certify for free, and on some contracts we have already this type of requirements. So I think the only thing is the maturity of ETS, as Christian said and Attilio. So we need to make it work and to have a first run and to have something mature. But once the maturity is done, I do not see why we won't have independent cybersecurity assessor to demonstrate that the security case is valid. And at short term, I think as an industrial, we will provide your safety of your cybersecurity case to the railway operator, and the railway operator will use his own team or perhaps subcontractor to assess on a case-by-case basis for a cybersecurity case. But if we have something which is independent and so on, I think it will ease the job for everyone.
Yeah, thank you for the view. So I'm quite happy that I don't have any objection to your views, and that we are not in contradiction. And referring back to the question of ERA making this TS mandatory in the next TSI, I share your views that this is a bit premature, maybe, that we need to gain some maturity on this technical specification prior to make it mandatory in the TSI. Because as a reminder for the audience, any requirement in a TSI is something that is subject to a validation by potentially a notified body. So here as well, we need to take extra care. And I think I have heard this message from several railway stakeholders, infrastructure managers or railway undertaking, that well, the certification process is already very complex and costly from time to time. So we need to be very adequate in the apportionment of new requirements with regard to cybersecurity to also take this into consideration.
Also without any certification, these tests will be costly. Will be extremely costly. Would like to underline that cybersecurity doesn't come for free. Oops, yes. Lost you.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you, Attilio, this comment as well. There was an additional question, maybe more on the, we are already in the next steps there. And there is a question on the timing adoption and convergence of security techniques that will complement DCS. Because for the timing in the TS, we are not going to the bits and bytes of technical requirements on e.g. cryptography or on e.g. shared security services. By the way, we will have a very interesting presentation tomorrow on what Shift2Rail has been developing for that. But here from this panel already, how do you see the timing adoption for those techniques that would improve the resiliency of the railway system to cyber threats? Who wants to start first? Christian, maybe?
So with respect to those topics, currently from an operator perspective, we are working on lots of specifications there and also doing lots of research. For instance, Shift2Rail will have some what's happening at operator side is that cybersecurity gets more and more in the focus. So you have your tenders, you write in them what you would like from the systems, and then you hand it over to the supplier. Of course, this is not a process that can be done from 1 year to the next year because at least in Germany, we have an infrastructure which is evolving, let's say it like this. We have digitization happening there and so on. With the new infrastructures, everything is quite okay. So things are, we ask the suppliers for performing techniques to mitigate threats and so on. But there are also older things. There are interlocking systems from the 80s and 90s, or even from the beginning of the last century. Okay, the ones of the last century are not hackable. The good thing, but these will require quite a bit of time to replace them and so on. So we are already working on replacing stuff and implementing things, but as most of the audience might be aware, there are certification processes that have to be fulfilled. And in some places, even if I change a small configuration setting at a switch, I have to do recertification, which is a bit of a work. And due to this, it's quite hard. But with the new systems, things are definitely improving with respect to cybersecurity. Suppliers get requirements and then fulfill them. I think, Serge, you might be able to tell more about the development times this takes on supplier side.
Yes, so in fact, to develop a new product is life cycle is 1, 2, 3 years. So it depends on the product. So this is intrinsically provides some delay on the target and the delivery of a system. So, and it will depend on the industrial and it will depend on the product supplier itself. So as a system integrator and product equipment provider, as some, for example, we can perform things at architecture level, but will depend on the ecosystem and the supplier ecosystem and some supply product. And so the whole ecosystem has to grow in order to be able at the end to ensure a certain resilience level. So the migration won't be a big step. It will be a set of small steps. Probably first some defense, perimetric defense for legacy system and so on, and arriving to more and more fleet which are easily updatable and so on. So the key challenge, one of the key challenge is the maintainability and the easiness of the to perform security update and to maintain the system in a secure state. And so to ensure the efficiency of the defense along the time as new vulnerability arise and so on and so on. And so after, what can be done either at easy to change the configuration easily, to monitor the incident and so on. So we have a kind of moving target also. So what is up to date now in 2 years won't be up to date. So we are really in the sword and shield discussion, and we need to increase the shield more and more. So we have a moving target. So if I look, sorry for the long answer, but it's a bit complex. So if I look on, for example, on some contract we had 2 years ago, it was simple cybersecurity requirement, in quote, and we can deliver them. But we see the upcoming cybersecurity requirements from some countries. It's very high level cybersecurity requirement, and we have some work to perform to be able to deliver that. So we have a moving target, and it depends also to the risk appetite or avoidance from every operator. So we are also a kind of economic balance to find between risk avoidance and cost of the defenses. So,
Thank you, Serge, for this clarification. With regards the cyber risk precisely, there is an additional question, and I think it's linked also to what was mentioned by Laurent CEBULSKI this morning, that the timeline for the cyber risk is not exactly the same as the timeline for the railway risk. So how, from your perspective, you can reconcile those two aspects? And whenever something is authorized with a set of railway risk taken into account and some new cyber risks emerge, how do you handle that? Attilio, maybe.
Yes, from this point of view, I would say that we have a very strong organization already within RFI that works together with other stakeholders from the railway infrastructure in Europe. So I would say that we are well structured. The real problem that we have is about legacy systems, as also Christian was mentioning before. For those systems, we started about 3 years ago to work on those systems, and up to now the work is going very slowly. So we have to accelerate on that side. Then, as also Serge was saying, for new system is quite more easy, and also the TS is, I would say, 90% devoted, focused on new development, devoted on new systems. There is an important annex that is, in fact, called legacy systems, but it is just the beginning of work that we have to do.
Yeah. I know that this is also part of some shipwide investigation, the impact of cyber on the legacy system. Indeed. And I guess it might be my last question to Christian. So this is coming from the Q&A, and this is linked to what has been presented to us by Svetlana SCHUSTER this morning with regards to NIS2. And there is apparently now in this project of an update of the directive, the discharge for the management accountability. So Christian, what do you think about this possibility from the NIS2, and how would you see that this would impact the way you are doing cybersecurity at Deutsche Bahn?
Let's say it like this. At some point of time, it might become required to do certifications, also to ensure that you really did everything that was required. Or in case there is an accident, that you can simply go to the one who's checking whose fault it was to say, okay, we did everything that was possible. Of course, this will be some release of the management, but I think this will take a bit of time. So, okay. Yeah. But what's of course topic is so I got the question right, is the verification of the supplier's claims for compliance. Mm-hmm. This is something where we definitely will have to do something independent at the beginning from an operator's perspective, to maybe do some checks if things happen, if there are some issues, if everything's fulfilled, and in case something's not right, then go into more detail, because what we experienced especially is also that some suppliers claim to do stuff which they in fact in the end do not do. But this is, I think, the usual thing. You have stuff written on paper, you have to verify things. Yeah. A certificate from an independent assessor could be a solution, especially when it comes to in the end, mitigating risks from the management so that they are not sent to jail or wherever. But this is, I think, quite a topic to be worked on.
So this is something for, later on, as we mentioned before, on this certification topic. Yeah? And this is also something that we have identified with Marianti as the missing point from this conference, this online conference, also probably and rightfully highlighted by you because of the lack of maturity, but definitely certification will be an upcoming topic for cybersecurity in the railway domain. Huh? Well, we are now reaching the end of this session, so I would like to say a big thank you to Christian, Serge, and Attilio for a very detailed presentation on the 5701, for willingly answering those questions in the Q&A. Many thanks, and I will now give the floor back to Marianti for the closing remarks for today.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for the very nice conversation and being able to address a lot of the questions posed by the audience. I think it was much appreciated. To summarize the day, we started with a session on policy developments. The European Commission, 2 colleagues from the European Commission were present to give us the latest updates. Currently, the European Commission is proposing an update on the Network and Information Security Directive. It aims to strengthen further the cybersecurity measures that will be adopted by the member states and applied by the entities which are under scope of the ENISA Directive. That includes infrastructure managers and railway undertakings in the EU. Moreover, our colleagues from DG Move are fostering the awareness raising of the railway stakeholders. They do this in 2 ways. They have the land transport security platform and also the cybersecurity toolkit that our colleague Alexis kindly shared and is publicly available. And we concluded the policy session with a presentation by Laurent, who discussed how cybersecurity affects the current work of the national safety authorities and summarized the challenges. These are all listed in a white paper, which was created jointly with the French infrastructure manager and main railway undertaking, the French Cybersecurity Agency, and ERA. And what I took from Laurent's presentation is that there are several challenges that have to do with how we reconcile cybersecurity requirements and safety, current safety practices. And Laurent kindly offered a lot of proposals, and a lot were focused on how to increase cooperation and information sharing between the authorities as well. And this is a topic we will discuss tomorrow, as our concluding session focuses on this exact topic, information sharing and cooperation within the sector. I'll now pass the floor again to Thomas to give you the summary of the session you just followed and to conclude the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianti. So indeed, on the standardization side, we had, I think, a very good session thanks to the participation of those eminent experts from the Working Group 26. And it is now clear that this Working Group 26 has delivered the promising technical specification 5701 on cybersecurity for railways. That is now under review by the national committees. It's clear to me, and I hope this is also for all the participants, that a lot of work has been achieved to have this release of the technical specification, that the maturity will for sure grow from after the publication, but that already a huge effort has been done by all the experts taking part in Working Group 26 to achieve this. And we will have a published version of this technical specification before the summer. And I think this is really expected by many railway stakeholders to lay the foundations of a common risk analysis methodology, to link the security analysis to the safety case, as was demonstrated by RFAE in their case study. And we at EU Agency for Railways, we are definitely taking this expected specification into account. And we will, in the first step, make a voluntary reference to this standard through the application guides, be it for the CCS, CSI, or for the common safety methods, to give a clear indication to the railway stakeholders that this technical specification is really a milestone for the railway stakeholders when it comes to cybersecurity in the railway domain. So with this summary now, we would like to thank you, Marianti and myself, very much for your attendance today. We will reconvene tomorrow at 10 for 2 additional sessions on research and innovation, and also on cooperation and information sharing. So we are looking forward to meeting you all tomorrow. Thank you and goodbye.